We're going to be hearing from Eliot Gattegno. He's the Managing Director, University of Michigan Ross School of Business. And he was previously a professor of business administration and arts and humanities at Minerva Schools and was a professor of business and arts at NYU, where he co-founded the program on creativity plus innovation. He also founded and served as the inaugural director for the Chinese University of Hong Kong for innovation, design, and entrepreneurship with the city of Shenzhen.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Michael, for the invitation. I want to make this hopefully as conversational as possible. And I know that we've got 72 of us essentially on right now on this session live. And I just would love to, first and foremost, encourage question and answers and sort of make this as question and answer as absolutely possible.
And Eliot?
Topic. What's that, Michael?
Okay. Would perhaps I could stay on and kind of be your conversation buddy? Would that work? Because I believe that you built this as in fact a conversation, not a presentation with slides, right?
Precisely. So I would absolutely love it if you could just stay on there, Michael, and then we could continue along this way. But others. Definitely toss things in actively in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring those in real time as well. So I wanted to basically just start out kind of giving a little bit of an overview of the way the Ross School of Business currently operates. While we are an American institution and we have residential programs in Ann Arbor, we also have launched an online MBA that we've been incredibly fortunate to get to work with Construct and the creation of many of our different courses. And in addition to the online MBA that we've started and launched this past year, for many years we've had a global MBA. And the global MBA has sort of cohorts that are based in various places in Asia, Japan, South Korea, mainland China. And so while everybody was taken probably by surprise in what was going on with COVID-19, we had a little bit of a sort of a head start in knowing that we needed to prepare because basically as soon as mainland China was impacted, we were immediately impacted in our first ultimately, our first program was needing to shift from being fully residential in the region to immediately going online. And so we were doing this is basically in early February, making some of these different decisions. And so we got basically about a 6-week head start on putting things together. And so that's the sort of one piece of information to share out about Ross. The second piece of information, and really the thing that I want to drive home today, is the sort of purpose of that I would want everybody to take away is something that I hopefully put into all of my students in the business classes that I work with them, is that strategy drives structure. And I think at Ross, one of the things that our dean does incredibly well is makes the strategy very clear to all members of the Ross community. And so we have basically two kind of strategies that are essentially relevant here. And then I want to share out some of the principles. And so as the ultimate topic for the discussion that we're having today is going to be on how to form basically a rapid response team. I really think it's this strategic piece that's so incredibly, we're so incredibly fortunate to have at Ross because it made the rest of things that have basically gone into place just incredibly easy because we had this clarity. So the number one thing to basically talk about is our performance management system that we use, for lack of a better word. But instead of calling it that, we call it the Ross way. And it's 4 parts. And so these 4 parts are, number 1, be an owner. Number 2, connect and collaborate. Number 3, do great things. And number 4, learn and grow. And so because, of course, we're a business school and we're primarily focusing on higher education, we do not have just a rapid response team that we can call on or basically there's no preparing for this type of, basically the type of situation that we're currently in. Everybody needs to ultimately come up and play their part. But the kind of answer, the why is this important? How does this relate to, what we're doing? How can we do this? All of it was ultimately framed initially through the Ross way. This gives everybody an opportunity to continue doing what they're doing at the Ross School of Business in terms of a new way to look at being an owner, connecting and collaborating, doing great things, and then learning and growing. And then as a manager leading different teams, you're able to talk most of the time indirectly through the lens of the Ross way and coaching people. And these are conversations that we have on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis already. And so that's the first part of the strategy for sharing things, for basically how we initially started tackling everything here. The second part of it was our digital education strategy. So we knew that we were going to be bringing everything digital, but what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And why are we going to do it? Who's going to do what? All of the different areas of responsibilities. Everybody has the same list of questions it's basically gone through. But immediately, because of the work that we already did for the online MBA, we were able to leverage all of that work and really thinking through and just immediately go to what that playbook was and go back to it. And so I was primarily responsible for creating the school's digital education strategy and what we're using for the creation of all of our online courses. And it's really incredibly simple. So that strategy is three-pronged. It's active learning, social learning, and experiential learning. Starting first with experiential learning, it is something that's just a salient feature of the Ross MBA already. Ross in the 1980s pioneered experiential learning through their multidisciplinary action programs, also known as MAP, which are basically consulting projects that students go all around the world, work in real business problems with real companies, and that is a course that is part of the MBA curriculum. So we wanted to be able to sort of foster experiential learning in as many different ways as possible, but in an online medium. Social learning, the second part of it. Social learning is just, again, one of those salient parts of going to an MBA. There's the courses, there's all the academic things that we talk about, and I think many of the academics would love to think that's why people are going for an MBA program. Student data and feedback from students tells a different story. It's often that the most important thing that people are basically getting away from their MBA is the network, is their friends, is the different people, is those experiences that they have had. Those are their key takeaways that are relevant to them going forward in the world. And then the final part of it is active learning. When students are actually doing the knowledge acquisition, wanting to make sure that they're doing so is in an active and an engaged way. And so we're going to be able to ultimately help them retain and hopefully apply what they're learning in the academic context to that experiential context, to sharing out with their, the social network that they're building there. And so all of the decisions we're making, should we do this? Should we do this? It's very simple. Well, does it help facilitate active learning? Does it help facilitate social learning? Experiential learning? If so, how? If not, then the answer is very clear, not at this time. So those are the two sort of strategic pieces. Also, the final piece is the sort of guiding principles for the entire school to really use. And this was, I think, incredibly important because, again, everybody wants to try to solve every single problem and help and actually be part of doing the Ross way. But at the same time, everybody's really nervous. And so, of course, worrying about their job security, worrying about their health, families, and so on and so forth. And so to really just create an environment where everybody was able to focus on what's most important, came up with 4 guiding principles. And so those guiding principles were ultimately protect our people. So then everybody was incredibly clear that everybody's job is to keep all current faculty and staff employed and healthy. For example, making sure that everybody always will have access to health benefits. So that was the first guiding principle to setting up all of the different teams that were going to come. The second one was delivering on our academic mission. We really wanted to make sure that we focused the limited resources on excellence in education and research. So in other words, activities that are going to most value and basically have the most value and impact for the school. The third thing was engaging and connecting with our community. So we really wanted to ensure that people would be able to continue engaging and connecting across all of the different stakeholders that we have at the school, both internal and external, and then identify and meet the community needs that we are living in. And so while we often will be throwing those things off the wayside immediately, wanted to make sure that that was the third guiding principle that everybody knew was in importance. And then 4, still, we needed to be strategic. We still needed to be investing in long-term excellence. So we wanted to be able to make sure that we were preparing to rebound stronger and then take advantage of future opportunities. So key strategic initiatives, reputation, so on and so forth. So these are the four guiding principles that we ultimately use to drive all decision making. And these were basically worked on together from the senior leadership team and then socialized and communicated out to management and all members, faculty and staff of the institution, as well as
What,
students.
what was that? Was that difficult to come up with those? That you just answered my first question I was going to have about that is how you actually develop that, especially kind of in the heat of the moment.
So I think that the key thing that I want to basically drive home there is most of this work was already done, and it was basically really transforming and shifting, and then also just re-communicating, constantly communicating to people these things that
Right.
already existed. The Ross way already existed. Digital education strategy already existed. The guiding principles also already existed, and it was just framing it in a way that was relevant to the situation. And so this was not something that the institution spent much time at all. This was basically over the course of a weekend, things were put together and shared out and immediately communicated to the school.
Interesting. And yet I can imagine others hearing this thinking, well, maybe perhaps we don't have some of that as fleshed out as we'd like or whatever, but this is still, I think, a good template for others to follow, because it sounds like it's worked for you. I mean, I don't imagine in February when you were doing all this early on because of Hong Kong that you had really anything else to look at that point. You were kind of pioneering, right?
And it was very much going back to, okay, we're constantly preparing for, basically needing to be, we're constantly working on strategy. It is not one thing that is set and that is basically good to go and put there, but it's a constant discussion. And we've been making perpetual change over the past few years at the institution. And so why change? Why do this? And then how does this relate to our mission? How does this relate to our brand? How is this going to basically impact our finances? These are questions that are just part of every single conversation. And so we have been an organization that has been going through change and is perpetually changing. And so being a changing organization, this was a drastic pivot from what was expected, but we were not needing to go from a place of basically stasis to moving. We have already been moving, and we have been moving very actively in the digital space. So it's made this type of, made basically this type of process and going just a little bit more actively into the online space relatively easy. Had this happened essentially 2 years ago, prior to building and starting the activities with the online MBA, it would have been a much different story.
Right. What would you recommend for those who perhaps, let's say they're where you were 2 years ago before the online MBA organization and so on? What would you recommend for those in that situation?
So I think, again, the number one thing here is really coming up with basically what your strategy is going to be. Obviously, at the school level, the sort of guiding principles, what are important to you in the things that you do the best, and then see how they're relating to the new areas of development, new areas of strategic initiatives that you might be wanting to undertake. These could be things in online education. Maybe it's going to be more community engagement work. Maybe it's going to be in opening new types of centers with different sorts of streams of research. There's any number of ways to be looking at it, but I think having just a clear strategy on this ultimately makes the sort of next phase, which I'll share in a moment,
Right.
things of going into just that much easier. So, and I think that once we had basically these things worked out and understood the importance of communicating and how we were going to be communicating them, we were able to come up with ultimately get a little bit more tactical. And so, just basically thinking, what's going to be the hardest thing? So, like, if you were needing to put this together, lots of busy people, Michael, what would be really hard for you?
Right. Are you asking me?
I'm asking you. Yeah. What do you think would be really hard to just figure out?
Yeah, probably figuring out first, what are the first things? What are the most important things first, right? Just really that identifying process, because I don't think that people come to this with a lot of front end analysis, right?
Yep. And so in even getting into that, and like, how are you going to even figure out what those are going to be? You're going to need to probably get some meetings together with people.
Yep.
And this is like a perennial issue for everybody, is figuring out what's going to happen. So something super tactical that ultimately end up happening is, well, we're going to need lots of meetings, and all of a sudden people have meetings for 14 hours a day on Zoom, and that's a pretty terrible way to live. So what we're going to do is we're really going to isolate when these meetings are happening related to this, because still we have normal work to do. Remember, we need to be investing still in long-term excellence, still delivering on our academic mission, engaging and connecting with our community. And the way that's what's going to ensure all of our people are protected. And so we set very tactically, basically meetings related to this happen for 2 hours a day between 8 and 9 a.m. and 3 to 4 p.m. So no matter what, I mean, people are going to have a lot of additional things on their plate, but the sort of making it just very easy so you're able to kind of get into these different task teams, as we've called them, as we've ultimately formed. All of those meetings are taking place for the majority between 8 to 9 a.m. and then 3 to 4 p.m. And so it makes sort of the coordination much easier. Everybody knew that you're leaving those times open for meetings to be scheduled pretty much on a sometimes just a few hours before they're happening, sometimes days, but perpetually. So those parts of the days are blocked. I can get in and I will share screen if I can share screen, which I think I ought to be able to.
Yeah, I think you can.
Just the actual spreadsheet that we put together. Happy to share this out with anybody who might be interested, because the people might be going through this for a lot longer or taking a little different. So, and then going back to what you just said. So like, what are the first things? So we need to figure out what the target is that we're trying to hit. I think there was an article that probably everybody has read with 15 scenarios for fall 2020. Well, planning for 15 scenarios is pretty much impossible for a small group to be doing. And so what we did is we basically whittled it down to 4 that represented pretty much all of those 15 scenarios that were shared out. So, you know, going from D, a fully remote experience, C, residential and online, B, residential with distancing, and then A, ultimately residential with a compressed timeline. And so those are the 4 targets. So everything immediately became really clear. Then we said, okay, you know, you can talk about how long a piece of string is for pretty much ever, but we need to make this incredibly specific. So, you know, we're a business school. We're used to having, you know, basically, you know, using SMART goals, basically specific, measurable, agreed upon, and time bound. So, you know, we're ultimately going to be putting together some sort of a time frame from when we started this. So we ultimately said phase 1 is going to be from April 29th to May 22nd. This is going to be the planning and teamwork, 3 weeks of figuring things out. The next phase, which starts the week of May 25th, is going to be reporting out and discussion. So we're just going to have, last week, we had a big week of reporting out and discussing what's going to be next. June 1 to 19, phase 2, again, of planning and teamwork. And then the week of June 22nd, this sort of planning out. And then we're ultimately right now operating under the assumption that we'll be making decisions as to what we're doing for the fall by early July with some basically informed clarity.
Oh, okay, great. I was wondering what was on the left, if the dates were over there. Okay, I see. Yeah, phase 1. Okay.
And then so we divided up all of the different activities that needed to be done into these different teams. Basically, academic continuity action team, operations, instructional technology, making sure that our people are well taken care of. So a staff action team, a student action team, alumni action team, and a faculty action team. These are all of our different stakeholders. Also making sure that the academic program offices, one action team is put together focusing them, career development, the registrar, human resources, and then basically making sure when we get into phase 2, we knew how specific it was ultimately going to need to be. So going back up to the top, every single action team had really specific areas to evaluate. So, you know, it could be something as specific, physical distancing, cleaning protocols. What are these going to be? How are we going to schedule the rooms? Basically just work together to break down all of the different things that we're doing, and then gave incredibly, you know, general. So everybody in every single team is working off this. So you know who's working on what. If you need to go someplace, you know, I removed the individual people's names here. We used to have a team lead name and then someone and basically contact information to get more. And so we'd be able to really easily facilitate cross communication. But the the individual, basically the scope of what the teams were for this phase one were just incredibly, complex, but really specific. So for example, one of the teams that I was part of, I had the unique privilege, given my normal role, of serving on multiple and leading multiple of the task teams here, as well as be a part of the overall design. We wanted to be, one of the teams was focusing specifically on teaching scenarios and determine for basically each. So what technology is going to be required? That's the tools piece. How will faculty be trained to use it? That's the training piece. And then how will faculty be supported when they use it? That's the support piece. We've ultimately planned for all 4 of those residential experiences. We built out our schedule, our timeline, our specific deliverables, how we were going to work, the different people that we wanted to make sure that we engaged with, in fact, all the different stakeholders, picking out representatives from that, and then where everybody was able to execute. And then at the different meetings that we had, we're able to kind of basically share out and move forward. And so we've gone from having a totally messy, amorphous, something to hit within a few days, basically working together with senior staff at the institution to coming up with this plan, starting to execute, and then starting to plan for the fall. And so, this has gone precisely on schedule and as it has planned thus far. And now we're entering into phase 2, where we're getting a little bit more specific, a little bit more tactical, and we're starting to run out the training for the fall and going into that element of things.